Good morning. So as promised, I am back today with the second in our series of videos. And today we're going to talk about 5 things that I would love you to do if you are homeschooling this fall in this crazy 2020 year. And first I want to give a caveat that because I'm not an experienced homeschooling parent, I reached out for input from some friends of mine who are experienced homeschoolers for info. So I come from the perspective of being a pediatric chiropractor. So I have your kids' wellness at the top of my heart and my mind. And so I'm going to share the wellness tips that I think could help when you're homeschooling this fall. And then I'll continue to try to share other resources, tips on actual homeschooling that I find, because there's actually a lot of them, especially this fall, as many families are homeschooling who didn't plan that in the past. So 5 things to do if you're homeschooling this fall. The first is your children's wellness. So the things I would love for you to work on with your children's wellness. Some of them are the exact same things we talked about a couple days ago when we did the 5 things to do if you're sending your children to school this fall. So the first one is sleep. If you're homeschooling, I would encourage you to try to stick to a good routine that includes a good bedtime routine. Because studies show that kids thrive on routines, and they do better that way, especially when we talk about sleep. The best way to ensure your kids are getting enough sleep is to stick with a consistent bedtime and wake time. So working on routine when you're homeschooling is really helpful. The second is nutrition. Same things we talked about with the last video. The number 1 and 2 things that I wish more kids in America had was more vegetables and fruits and less sugar. So I would encourage you, if you're homeschooling, to use this time. Perhaps teach your kids how to cook a little bit. Work on some nutrition lessons on why veggies are important and what they do for your body and all the different colors of vegetables and how each color does different things for your body. That could be so fun to work on. And again, less sugar. I would encourage you to remember, if you're homeschooling, that if you don't buy it, your kids can't eat it for the most part. So you're in charge of their nutrition. You're in charge of what you buy at the store and bring home to your house. So own it and try to get your kids the best nutrition possible. I would still recommend vitamin D, even if you're staying home this fall, because most of us don't get enough vitamin D because we live up north in Wyoming, and most kids can benefit as far as their immune system, their growth and development, and brain function from vitamin D. And getting adjusted. I recommend that healthy kids get checked by a chiropractor every 3 months or so during their developing school age years, more frequently if we have an issue that we're working on, but that's a really good plan. Okay, so that was number 1, was my wellness tips. Number 2 is community. Seek out community if you are homeschooling, because we need each other. And I know that there is at least one fantastic group of homeschooling parents here in Worland. Who knows, there might be more. And definitely seek out community with other parents and other families, not only so your kids can have time with other kids, but so that you can have that community of other parents as well. I know that might be challenging in the age of COVID, but try to make it happen. Get community to the length that you're comfortable with as far as being with other people. So that was number 2. Number 3 is self-care for parents. If you're homeschooling this fall, your self-care is incredibly important. You can't be the parent you want to be, especially if you're homeschooling, unless you feel like your bucket is being filled on a weekly basis. So don't be afraid to make that a priority for your family, that your self-care, whoever parents are in the family and homeschooling, all the parents, make sure that that's a priority. Whether that might be getting up 15 minutes before your children so that you have a few minutes of quiet in the morning before they wake up, or that's, scheduling some things that you love to do, like taking a walk or a run by yourself and having your kids do something else during that time. Really make sure you put that on your list of things to do, that your self-care is on there, because it's important. Some other tips that I was given by my friends who have homeschooled before and who are homeschooling now is to remember that you are enough. I would imagine that put in the position to be homeschooling my kids, I would be really scared that I wasn't the teacher that they needed. But that was one of the big things that the moms I talked to wanted to tell other parents, was that you are enough. You are your child's first teacher, and you can tackle this. Also remember, you don't have to be perfect, especially not in this year of the pandemic. We are not striving for perfection. The things I have learned about homeschooling is that it only lasts for a few hours a day. When you're homeschooling one-on-one with your children, you don't need a full hour or a full 8-hour school day. So it's very different than a typical school day. So remember those things. Be gentle with yourself. Give yourself a whole lot of grace. Some of the other tips the moms were telling me is, remember that this doesn't necessarily need to be permanent. You can change your mind. If your children change or circumstances change, this doesn't have to be permanent. So just, one day at a time, one step at a time, 1 hour at a time if necessary. Okay, so number 4, my 4th tip is manage screen time. One of my fears as a chiropractor, as someone who's in the wellness space, as we go towards a lot more homeschooling, is that children are going to be spending a whole lot more time in front of a screen than is good for their development. So that scares me. So I would really encourage, if you're homeschooling, to try to limit the amount of time that the child is staring at a screen. There's a couple problems with too much screen time. But one of the biggest problems, especially when we talk about younger children, especially preschool age, but I think all the way into kindergarten and definitely the first few years of elementary school, the biggest problem with too much screen time is what they're missing out on. The time, if they're on a screen for too many hours a day, they're missing out on time that they're not doing other things that are really necessary for their brain development and physical development, all the development, because what kids need is time to touch things, to play with blocks, to put things together, to figure things out. But they just need that neurologic input from their hands and their feet and their bodies. They need to move their bodies in different ways that they do not get sitting in front of a screen. And so I would encourage you to do what you can to limit screen time. And I know what a challenge that is. And especially in the last however many months we've been home, screen time has been a real challenge with my kids to limit that. But I also have seen that my kids respond to the limits I set. And so don't be afraid to be the parent and set those hard limits. So going along with screen time, what they do need is outside time. So be sure you're getting your kids outside, I'd say as much as possible, but at least a couple hours a day. Children need to be outside. They need the sunshine, they need the grass, they need the neurologic input of being outside. It's so good for their stress levels. It's just so good for them. So not only do they need exercise, of some sort, I'm sure you're going to work on some PE into that, but make sure your children are getting outside. We're so blessed to live here in Wyoming where there's so many different outdoor opportunities that get your kids outside. Okay, number 5, we're on to the last tip. The last one is ergonomics. So your kids are going to be in front of a screen to some extent, or they're going to be reading, they're going to be sitting, to some extent. I just saw a really great graphic, a bunch of graphics that I shared on our page, I think it was a couple days ago. So I'll post to that again. But when we talk about ergonomics for children, some of it's the same as adults. You want to try to make sure that the computer monitor or the book or the tablet or what have you is straight in front of their face. Not looking down, not looking up like that too much, straight in front of their face for the most part. You want to try to have everything else at a right angle. So the elbow at a right angle, the hip and knee at a right angle. For children, this often involves maybe sitting on a pillow, maybe a pillow behind them, maybe a footstool to bring their feet up. Those are little tweaks can make a big difference for their ergonomics. Kids might not complain about back pain, neck pain like you and I would if we were spending hours and with really bad ergonomics, but it's just it affects their body just as much as it does adults. So it's really important to try to have good ergonomics for children when they are sitting in front of screens or reading. A couple tips with children that apply just to children: tummy time is a really great thing. My kids kind of got used to me saying tummy time this summer when I had seen that they were sitting too much with, their tablet right in front of them or something. I'd say tummy time, which means tummy on the floor and the device in front of them, because for children, that's actually a really good position for them to switch it up a little bit. So if they're on their tummy on the floor, you can imagine that their spine is actually going to be arched like this, and that's a good thing for a while. It's just a good position to switch it up a little bit. Other good things for kids are sitting on a ball or a wobbly seat. They make all kinds of different devices for that, but something that moves underneath them can be a great thing for them to sit on when they do have to sit. I think that wraps it up. I'd be happy to answer any questions later. If you have any questions, please pop them in the comments. Again, my heart goes out to all of the parents this year making these impossibly hard decisions that we have never had to make before. And here to help and support you no matter what you are choosing to do this fall with your children. Talk to you later. Have a great day.